Hello and welcome to the Patreon channel of True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So this is the 5th episode in the deep dive series dealing with the crime scene evidence. It's actually the 4th episode dealing strictly with the crime scene evidence. So we will be looking at the basement as a very important area in the Watts case in terms of the crime scene. Now, I've just watched the Netflix documentary a second time, slowly and carefully. In the entire documentary, there's basically one image very quickly that is showing Chris Watts in the basement or showing the basement at all. There is a second sort of flash to the same kind of scene where Chris Watts is in that corner, sort of in the gym area, and that is basically it in the entire documentary. There is no footage in the documentary of the refrigerators. There's absolutely no footage of the huge amounts of bins filled with products, filled with medicines, filled with junk, going sort of floor to ceiling from one end of the basement to the other. That's simply not acknowledged in the documentary. Now, although I don't really want to go into this in much detail here, the documentary also never ever mentions multi-level marketing or Thrive or Lavelle. When I watched the documentary the second time, I was sort of keeping an eagle eye open for Thrive patches, and I think I saw maybe two. Also, if you blink, you'd miss it. But obviously, this is a key aspect of the case, which is what was Shanann's job? Because anyone's job has an impact on who someone is, what they do day to day, and that isn't really acknowledged here. It's really not acknowledged at all. There is a link between the multi-level marketing and what is in the basement. And I think the best way to illustrate what I'm talking about is in the series on becoming a guard in Central Florida. You have the situation turned or inverted, right? So you have the husband who's the multi-level marketer, and it's based on the idea of Amway at the time. I think it's set in the 80s or 90s, but it's based on the Amway multi-level marketing thing. And at one point, after her husband has died, the wife, who's been very unhappy with her husband and very unhappy with what he's been doing, finds out that he's gone to a specific address repeatedly, and I think she suspects it could be an affair or something like that, and when she goes, it's kind of an oldish lady, and he's simply been dumping box loads of product that he's ordered, and she says, "This is our house." You basically see piles and piles and piles of boxes going on almost as far as the eye can see. It's like it's in a property that's got quite a large yard, and it just piles. It's almost like a warehouse just of product, and all of this is someone who's addicted to multi-level marketing, trying to get onto a certain level, desperate to earn the rewards that you get from having a certain amount of product, and obviously buying shitloads of it and unable to sell virtually all of it. And this woman, played by the excellent Kirsten Dunst, and I will put a trailer to On Becoming a Guard in Central Florida in the description. You really get the feeling for the artifice, the desperation, the absurdity, the craziness, the greed, the ridiculous maelstrom that is multi-level marketing just in this trailer. So I really do recommend that you guys watch it. Now, this is something that is missing from the documentary, and as you know, I've heard that it's very authentic, and I agree that it is very authentic because it is based on the archive. But what I don't appreciate at all about the way that the documentary has gone about things is it's perpetuating a fairy tale. It's perpetuating a false fairy tale. It's perpetuating a narrative that everything was happily ever, everything was a happy fairy tale, right? When it wasn't a happy fairy tale to begin with. There's nothing about a bankruptcy. There's nothing about the whole MLM farce. There's nothing about even Shanann's trip to, Arizona. It was so ill-timed, and if she hadn't taken that trip, maybe everyone would have still been around. But that isn't even touched upon. There's nothing about what she was doing, what it involved, and all that kind of thing. And in terms of the 5-week trip to North Carolina, that was actually also trying to make money, also through Thrive. And none of that is acknowledged in this documentary. And it is acknowledged when you go into the basement and you see the shitload of basically excrement. You basically just see all these containers filled with garbage that you can't get rid of. And in every container, someone had to spend money to get whatever is in there, and that can go nowhere as well. And that is the dirty underbelly of the Watts home. It's this this enormity, this sort of colossal dumping ground of product. And that's another aspect that's just never identified. You just see all these containers, but it's never really identified what's in them. Chris Watts does say at a certain point that there are a lot of medications in the basement, but I think that's really just on the one side, where you kind of see the you actually see the officer, I think it's Officer Lyons, advancing on their, shining her torch, and then actually taking photos, and you can clearly see those are big containers with medications inside. But what about all the other containers? Some of it is toys, but it certainly isn't all toys. And just as there are two faces to Chris Watts, there are two faces to Shanann Watts. There also, and this is a little bit sad to say, there are also two faces to children, just as there are two faces to puppies. There are, the good puppies that listen to you and do as they're told, and go outside to do their business, and then they're the same puppies who are naughty. It's just a fact of life. There are two sides to every story. There are two sides to every person. And so in the case of the Watts home, this fairy tale house that is sparkling clean, you actually hear it in the documentary where the dog handler says, there's something that's not real about this. She doesn't say it in those words, but she says something like, it is so clean that it doesn't seem right? And that's exactly the case. Even the basement was sparkling clean. And this episode is going to deal with the basement. We're going to look at the refrigerators. We're going to look at the modem. We're going to look at the bed. We're going to look at those containers. We're going to look at the medications as well. And I can tell you, as someone who's written a few books on this case, someone who's researched this case, I believe more than anybody else, but there certainly are people who are very dismissive of me and my work. Almost the faster you bring it out means the less credible it is, something like that. But I have literally dedicated entire days, weeks, months, and probably effectively the last 2 years to studying this case. And so what I can tell you is one of the biggest revelations of this case is a revelation that no one has paid any attention to. And that is where there was a time when Chris Watts admitted to using oxycodone to poison Shanann, and he admitted that in his letters to Cheryl and Cadel. And then everyone suspected that his family must have given him oxycodone. And now, again, it was this whole thing of, where can we find an accessory? Where can we find an accessory to this? And it was either going to be Kessinger gave him the oxycodone, or his sister Jamie, or his mother, or somebody. And in order to address these rumors, in order to shut down all of this sort of ruinous speculation, which came about as a result of these letters that he wrote, his family asked him to kind of go on the record and say where he got the oxycodone from. And I was then contacted to let people know that that he'd basically said he got the oxycodone, he got it from the basement and so on. And I kind of responded just saying, well, no one is going to believe me that this is what he said. You need to record him saying it. You need a voice recording of him saying this. And so they went back and they recorded it, and then edited out the responses from, I guess it was from his parents, or I'm not sure who spoke to him on the phone, but that was edited out. And so in order to edit it out, there were 3 little clips of Chris Watts explaining that he got the oxycodone and he got it from the basement. I'll also put a link to that in the description. And everyone laughed at it. Everyone said it's not Chris Watts, it's not his voice, and also, sort of been edited in a way to make up the whole story. And so it's all a big joke and no one pays any attention to it. And of course, the flip side to it is, well, it's possible that Chris Watts got the murder weapon from the basement. And so that's the answer to the first question that I posed to the people on Patreon. As I said, there are 2 murder weapons that come from the basement, and almost all of them are correct. Yes, oxycodone is the one, but almost all of them have been incorrect. Well, actually, all of them have been incorrect from a particular perspective on the other one. And I'm going to be revealing that second murder weapon after the break on Patreon. Probably tomorrow I'm going to be dealing with the Facebook that is revealed in the Netflix documentary. I'm going to be dealing with the, let's call it the fake Facebook, the Facebook that is shown via the documentary, and then Shanann's actual Facebook, including her profile picture as it really is today and also as it was at the time. And that's, I think, going to be quite an interesting episode. That'll be on YouTube probably tomorrow. So if you're interested in that, check that out. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment. If you do share, please use the hashtag TCRS. And now let's get started, and we're going to start by addressing that question of what was the second murder weapon. Now, I realize this is kind of from a particular perspective, so you might say he could have retrieved a plastic bag from the basement, and I agree, that's true. And I do think that it makes sense that Watts kind of had help when he murdered Shanann, meaning that it wasn't just a pure strangulation, that it was, there might have been a rag soaked in ethanol or pure alcohol or something that caused her to lose consciousness faster than she otherwise would have. It just makes sense. Whether that's true or not, I can't say. There's also the other, someone else said something about the nitrile gloves were sourced from the basement. That's also a good point, but that's not really what we're getting at. I wouldn't really say that the nitrile gloves were the murder weapon specifically. They played a role, I guess, but I wouldn't say that they were specifically the murder weapon. Someone else said that the router and the power switch sort of scenario, if you turn that off, that could also be part of it. That's quite an interesting way of thinking about it, but that's not what I'm talking about. Let me be specific now. So if the one murder weapon was oxycodone, and oxycodone was used on Shanann, I believe at least twice, on the 31st and then again on the 10th, on the 31st of July and the 10th of August. I don't believe oxycodone was used to kill Shanann, although I do think it's possible that it wore her down and if she'd had more sleep, she may have cottoned onto things quicker. I don't really get the feeling that he was ever trying to murder Shanann with oxycodone, but I do get the sense that he realized it needed to be a much bigger dose. And I believe that that is what he used on the children. I can't isolate whether the children were killed exclusively through an overdose or whether there was also asphyxiation. What I can say is there's no injury to their necks, there's no petechial hemorrhages, which suggests that they died while they were unconscious. Okay? And if you want to talk about, well, why didn't oxycodone come up in the autopsy, that I will talk about in the final episode in the series dealing with the well site. So in terms of the murder weapon, the other murder weapon, so it was oxycodone on the children and also to some extent on the unborn fetus. But in terms of the attack on Shanann, there clearly was it definitely was a strangulation murder. There's bruising to her hyoid bone and to the side of her face as well. And so to answer the question, well, the murder weapon was